welcome to episode 280 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian, having finished my 17th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. Amanda Jones's upcoming book, That Librarian, will be available starting on August 27th, but you can pre-order your copy now. And if you use the indie bookseller Cavalier House Books in Amanda's hometown of Denham Springs, Louisiana, you will get a signed copy. I've included a link in the show notes. When you look at the cover of Amanda's book, you might recognize the Freedom Fighter shirt she's wearing. She reached out to the designer Christy, who then designed a line of That Librarian apparel as well as That Librarian flair, such as a bag, sticker, and mug. I love that we can all be that librarian who advocates for our students' access to books every day. You will find a link to this online store in our show notes. Please note that 15% of the proceeds go to the Texas Library Association, as that is the home state of the designer. There's a good chance some listeners tuning in are familiar with DEMCO School Library Planner. I'm guessing several of you have even already ordered and received yours in the mail. This passion project is very much the product of Christina Holzweiss's vision and conviction that school librarians deserve a planner designed with us in mind. This is the second year I was honored to be invited to contribute as one of the 53 school librarians to provide helpful tips, strategies, and resources for this planner. And fun fact, longtime listeners will recognize 22 of these school librarians as past guests on the podcast. I just so happened to share a page with Lucas Maxwell, who has been on the podcast 5 times. I'm so grateful that Christina spearheads this project each year. I've included a link in the show notes. Take a look, friends. This spiral-bound, comprehensive planner includes customizable tabs, month at a glance, ample space for daily notes, and goal setting, as well as resources like daily celebrations, literature awards, and forms for completing needs assessments, curriculum mapping, grant writing, book fair planning, book requests, organizing your vendors, budgeting, and weeding, as well as self-reflection prompts, professional reflections, and much, much more. Consider treating yourself to this valuable tool in making the most of this upcoming school year. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at LMS_United. On Threads, you can find me at School Librarians United, and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I'm so excited to be working with them. I'm also grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 6. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for today's episode, I Survived, Year 1, District Library Coordinator, and my conversation with Sara Smith. Sara Smith, welcome back to the podcast.
Great to be here, Amy.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're not alone. You've brought a fur friend, yes?
Yes, I have.
Yes,
yep.
And while your fur friend is off screen, it's always nice to have somebody join us in the recording studio / our family room.
Yes.
Who is with you today?
Well, her official name is Ava, but we just call her Fat Cat.
Fat Cat, excellent. Little fat shaming to start off our conversation. Hopefully your cat is not stigmatized and has forgiven you. There we go. Oh, see, there a voice heard from. Hi, yes. Fat Cat. All right. So congratulations on scoring a podcast hat trick. This is your third episode.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to come back for the third time.
Well, and you know what? Given your expertise in all things, don't be surprised if we hear from Sara another time in the not too distant future. So, last summer, we got to talking while waiting in line to board a boat for the architecture tour in Chicago, or possibly we were walking around Millennium Park before the start of ALA's annual conference. And you decided to tell everybody that you were starting a new job in the fall, which always makes me a little nervous because the idea of you moving out of where you work is a concern. But listeners who have heard your first two episodes know that you are an amazing school librarian. Would you please tell us the job you have just left?
So the job I left in 2023, I had been a school librarian for 9 years as a high school librarian in a 9-12 high school setting.
Let me ask you, you now have a very different role, and one that I'm sure your employers were awfully glad that you took because they're keeping you in-house. They were able to hire somebody who already knew the district. So tell us, what is your new title? Because it's very exciting.
So officially, it's the district library coordinator, but colloquially, we just say district librarian because the coordinator is just kind of a weird add-on there. So yeah, I'm the district librarian for a district of 20 schools, and it's in the rural part, little squishy center of California, and it was a big change going from like a little contained high school into the district role. Yeah.
Well, and I'm hoping for the benefit of others, can you give us some statistics? Because I come from a district where there's like one high school, there's one middle school and a couple elementary schools. So for me, like that would be very different if I assumed that role. But for you, you have a lot of people you work with.
Let me paint the picture a little bit too for the people that are outside of California. California listeners, this is going to be pretty common and this is not going to sound weird to them. But people that are outside of California, this is going to be really strange. So when we are fully staffed, there are 21 classified librarians. So in other states, the other term for that is paraprofessionals. I am the only credentialed librarian in my district. So yeah, it's really strange for other people. Like, y'all probably just get out your fainting couches when I tell you this and just like swoon on yourself. So we have 2 comprehensive high schools, 2 continuations, a K-12 charter school that is like a blended online plus in person that has about 400 kids. And then we have 3 K-8s. We have 14 elementary schools. And then we have a junior high school that's 7-8.
Oh my gosh.
That has about 1,400 kids.
And, so when you say classified, these are paras, or sometimes people call them media techs or library techs. But I think that all of a sudden your job becomes even more vital because you're working with people who have not taken the coursework. I know in some spaces, and in order to get a certificate in library science, as opposed to a degree in library science, you can take like 18 credits or 12 credits or something that gets you a certificate in library science, but you also have to be a certified teacher. That's what we have here in the state of Michigan. It's a relatively new development. When I was in library school, go back into the early 2000s or early aughts, the only thing that was acceptable was a master's in library science, and that was the only thing that was offered. And so the state Michigan at least, has changed their sort of requirements, relaxed them, not just because they have a teaching shortage, but because it's easier to pay paras and library techs than it is to pay somebody like you or like me.
Yeah, so in the state of California, our education code requires 1 credentialed teacher librarian per district. And even that is kind of loose, because if you don't have somebody, you can contract with your county office of education for services, and they can come out and their credentialed person can offer services to your district. So you don't have to have a credentialed person, even. You can get away with it kind of, and then just pay oodles of money for your county office. It's kind of an epidemic of shortages in California we're 50 of 50 or 51, really. Like, I think Puerto Rico even has more teacher librarians, but we're the last in the country for hiring teacher librarians. So it's really a epidemic of teacher librarianness out here. We're like our friends, we all kind of, like, our little teacher librarian group, we all kind of joke that we're unicorns because we're so rare in the education world, because just districts don't need to staff us, and they can get away with having very inexpensive classified librarians. You're right that the staff doesn't have to have any sort of formal training. Some districts do offer it or do ask that their staff have it, and there are library tech certification programs. So in my area, there is a local junior college that does have a certification program. So some districts in this area do encourage their staff, and then it's part of the pay scale where they can get extra pay, or that they can get advancement in their district if they go get the tech certification. My district does not offer that, so there's only a few of the library techs in my district that have it. But most of the folks in my district are not trained at all.
Wow. And, friends, while we're sort of on the topic of places that you should move if you have a library degree, and I invite listeners, if you'd like to chime in and reach out. Right now, if I'm keeping track, what tops the list, if you are newly minted school librarian and you're looking for a place to go where you have a very good chance of getting a job as a certified school librarian, right now I'm going to say Georgia is probably at the top of that list. So is Virginia. And when I talk to Georgia and Virginia school librarians, they have a very high ratio of certified school librarians with master's degrees to the buildings that they support. Myself, I'm not in a position to be able to move, and so here we go.
California is low on that list. If you have the credentialing and you move here, you're probably not going to get a job very quickly.
Right. But you know what? I think it is important to recognize how California has addressed this solution. I mean, obviously, some of that problem they created by not requiring the highly certified with a master's or a certificate in library science. I'm curious, I'd like to know more about how you've spent this last year. The obvious question is, why did you decide to walk away from a job that you could do in your sleep for a new job, which I'm guessing you have at best a vague understanding of what to do? You said you were in your previous job for 9 years, and you have opted to take a job which is 100% new.
At 80% new. So so this is the fun part. So because it goes back to that, that California has to have, one credentialed librarian per district. So I was kind of caught in between a rock and a hard place. So I was the only person to apply to this job. And I at first wasn't going to apply because I was passed up the first time around. And so I was like, I'm not going to apply unless someone comes in and tells me that I should apply. And lo and behold, someone came and told me I should apply. I was asked to apply by my district. Then I found out I was the only person to apply. So there was a slight chance that because I was the only person to apply, that I would have been stuck as the teacher librarian of my school, and I would have had to do the duties of the district librarian at the same time. But then I would have had the title of teacher librarian and not district librarian. So I decided that I kind of had to take the role of district librarian so that I had the title and the prestige and not teacher librarian.
Without getting into detail, I'm hoping that you're compensated for your new job differently. Are you still on a teacher contract, I guess is my other question, because I have always been on a teacher contract as a librarian of a single building. I've never been a district coordinator. Are you still in the teacher contract?
I am.
Okay. All right. And has your job, I mean, does any of this come with more than just a change in your title? Is there any sort of monetary compensation for the fact that you are now overseeing all of these spaces and these individuals who require training?
Nope.
Oh.
I get a mileage stipend. I get a phone stipend. And I am still a teacher. It's not an administrative role in my district. So at other districts, sometimes it is an administrative role, but I am still a teacher, which means that I'm still, protected like a teacher. So I'm not an at-will employee like if I was an administrator, which is nice because I kind of run my mouth.
No,
so I get some protection. I know, right? So that's kind of nice. But no, I am still a teacher, so I am paid the same.
Well, but I think it's important that you aren't trying to do your school job and your district job. I think that that's a really important decision that you made. Sara, I'm hoping that this conversation today will help listeners who might also be entertaining a significant job switch. And in this case, becoming a district librarian coordinator. It seems like the fact that you're willing to share your experiences means it turned out okay this first year?
Yeah. So kind of going back to why I said that I was somewhat familiar with the job, you asked me if I was, like 100% new to me. I kind of took on the role of district librarian during COVID because our previous district librarian retired pre-COVID and we had a little bit of a job search going on. And while that was happening, it was COVID times and I was a little bit doing the job and then COVID hit and then our job search took a little bit of time and then someone else stepped into the role. So I was a little bit aware of how to support libraries, but in a completely different capacity. Obviously, we had to, everyone had to flip and do different library differently, during COVID times. When I decided that obviously like I needed to step into this role, forcefully or whatever, I decided that the real reason that me, Sara, needed to do this was seeing how much need there was in my district and how much support the staff needed and how much of a change that I could enact on more than just one library.
Well, and becoming that advocate, it sounds like that's going to be a really important part of your job moving forward.
Yeah. So anybody thinking about switching into a different role, it's about how much change can you put into multiple libraries. So like I oversee 20 different libraries. And so bringing all of that, I was involved in the high school library and bringing it up to date and building a graphic library that the kids love. And not just the, graphic library section, but the other sections as well. But being able to update and provide a space for the teens that they enjoy and they come to every day. And so I didn't feel like my work was done at the high school for sure. But I felt like while I could still continue doing work and building the high school up, I could start spreading out and see how can I build up the middle schools and start building up their collections, or how can I start building up all of these elementary schools? And, those kids need somebody too. And especially we're not getting credentialed librarians anytime soon, statewide. So it's up to me like to do all of this work for all of these different kids.
Well, and you're part of the solution. You're part of the solution. You're not part of the problem. You didn't create this problem. And you've gone from fixing one school to now working your magic. And I say magic, but it's hard work. It's hard work, and it's all the things that you do and I got to tell you, friends, Sara's library, and while I've never had a chance to visit it, I feel after our conversations, I feel like I know more about your space than many people in their spaces. But I got to tell you, I hold your space as a gold standard. When I talk to my students about my collection, I sort of sweep my arm, and we have a very modest collection in my school, and I'm working hard to fix that. But I would say to my students, I said, I have a friend in California, and her manga and graphic novel collection are this many books, because the number of books you have in your manga and graphic novels, that is my entire collection. And again, I'm part of the solution, not part of the problem. So I'm working on it, but it takes time and money. But your collection, like when I talk to you about all the things that you've done to build that up for your students, like I've set your space as that like goal for me. Like I want to have Sara Smith's graphic novel and manga collection, because every time I hear about it, I am both insanely inspired and jealous at the same time.
Oh, man.
We all have those things on our radar that we are trying to do. And remember, we are part of the solution. We are not part of the problem. So I have to ask, because you are the creator of the Graphic Library blog, something that I regularly share with people out in library land. And you are the go-to when I am looking for graphic novel and manga book reviews. Are you going to continue your reviews now that you are the district library coordinator? Because you were going at quite a clip there during the pandemic, I know.
Oh, yeah. So during the pandemic, some people made sourdough bread. I read books and posted reviews. I was posting a review a day. So that was like at the height. I'll probably never get to that level again. But now, so I have still been posting. It is definitely slowed down. I've gotten down to probably about like 10 a month.
Slacker.
I know, right?
Slacker.
So, but I've also prioritized. So I review for Booklist and School Library Journal. And so I prioritize them. I prioritize Booklist because they pay. But I do about 3 or 4 for each of those a month, and then about 10 for my own. And certain months I've 5. Like, so May was just awful. Like, May was so stressful because we had budget deadlines, we had ordering, it was closing up shop, just trying to get everything squared away with the school. So I think I did like 3 books. And I was like, okay, you guys get what you get. So it is what it is. I haven't had anyone complain. So, I think people are just still grateful that somebody's reading books.
So I'm curious, because you did mention money and budgeting and spending and those deadlines, because all districts have a cutoff at which point you can't spend money because the fiscal year has ended. But are you in charge of all the purchasing that's happening at each of your buildings now that you are the district coordinator?
Yes. I am responsible for helping kind of orchestrate and make sure all the money is spent. So, coming with that kind of untrained. And so the other part of the other unfortunate part with my district is that most of my people are not full-time. So our staff is 6 hours a day, which is barely enough time to cover the school day. There's not a lot of time in their workday to pick out books, and per our ed code, they're not I have to review every book that is purchased. So they can put together book lists and recommendations for what they want to buy and put into the library, but then I have to review every single one of them before it actually gets purchased. So I personally looked over and read reviews for over 6,000 books this year.
So
that's why I didn't read a lot of books this year, because I was reading reviews.
I'm trying to figure out how that process could somehow be streamlined. I'm hoping that year 2 is there are going to be certainly some that learning curve. We're going to talk about that.
Yes.
It just seems like, yes, I'm hoping, but I don't know how you make that process more streamlined.
Well, when you have one credentialed librarian that has to read the reviews for everything, there's only so much streamlining that can happen.
Right. Oh my gosh.
But yeah, and to good problems to have, right? I'm not complaining, but I am. We had a healthy budget this year, so that was lots of books to buy. And we did get some supply budgets and everything. So supplies, I do look it over, but I don't have to review that, right? Like, you want crayons, I don't have to read a review about crayons. Like, you bought makerspace materials. I don't need to read reviews for that. I just have to look over, like, okay, cool, you bought $1,000 worth of makerspace materials and whatever. So I don't have to review all of that. So those orders got put through a lot quicker. But then come May, I have to make sure we got everything, and then we paid for it, and the POs were closed out, and it was paid for. The vendors are happy. We are not gonna come in the fall and they're like, hey, we're mad at you because you didn't pay for things. So we had towards the end of the budgeting deadline, I had about 60 open orders that I was tracking down and trying to figure out, was this in the warehouse that it was sitting there, that it never got delivered to the school, so we didn't pay for it. So yeah, it was quite a mess at the end, trying to figure out where everything was and if we could close out everything. But I'm very organized, which people appreciated, and so I had spreadsheets, and it was color coded, and it had formulas that tracked everything. And so I did have a system that helped everybody. Some people didn't use it, and I kind of forced them to, because I did it for them. And I was like, no, you will put your POs on this spreadsheet. I made it for a reason, and it's going to help you. And then it's going to help me at the end too. And then it's going to help the budget office. So, we're trying to keep track of everybody's, orders, so that come, May, when we're trying to figure out where everything is, we had a year's worth of a system that was in place.
Well, and forgive me, but what you're doing is making sure all that money is spent.
Mm-hmm.
It is. And I know in every district I've ever been, it's a use it or lose it. And it's a use it or lose it. So if that money accidentally doesn't get spent for whatever reason, it's not like you can back up and say, oh, well, wait, we want to spend it now. No.
It's gone.
Nope, we're done. Yeah.
And then it becomes harder in the fall when I go for my proposals and say, okay, we want, at least the same, if not more money. They look at your budget from the last year and they say, well, you didn't spend, $50,000. Why are we going to give you an extra $50,000?
Right. Got it. So I'm wondering, thinking back a year, did you spend any of last summer differently because you were starting a new job in the fall?
So last summer, obviously we went to ALA, and then I went to San Diego Comic-Con, and I spent pretty much my entire summer steeped in as much graphic novels as I possibly could, which is pretty much how I spent my summers. But I focused a little bit more. So normally I spend my summers just focused on the graphic novels I want to, which is high school and adult. But last summer, I did a little bit more research in elementary and middle school, because I knew I was going to have to start collecting for those levels going into the district focus, and building up those collections at the middle school and elementary level. So at Comic-Con, I was kind of focused more on the publishers that cater more towards elementary and middle school level.
So what I'm really curious about, you said you're still on a teacher contract. Your calendar is the same as the teachers. You are not going in earlier, are you?
I got a little bit of time, on an hourly basis, to do a little bit of extra prep work just to get ready before everyone came back. I did some trainings, we have a new teacher institute first, like for 2 days before everyone else comes back to just train the new teachers. And it's basically an info dump. Like if we could like cut the top of their head off and just pour all the info into it and then put the top of the head back on. That's kind of what the new teacher institute is. It's really an overload of information for these poor new teachers. So I got some time to come and do a little bit of training then, and then get my office set up, and that was it. But yeah, I don't come back and do a lot of extra days, or I'm not on a long contract or anything like that. But I came in maybe a few days before everyone else, and that was it.
Well, and I will say, as somebody who has moved several districts in the Metro Detroit area, there is no way of getting around that information dump that happens for all new hires. It is done better when there's a cohort, when there is more than 1 or 2 people coming in piecemeal, where I really feel, and as hard as it is to be the recipient of that info dump, the harder thing is when you get hired 2 weeks into the school year or a month into the school year, and you're Johnny come lately, like nobody is holding your hand. You don't get that. We're going to, before your job starts, like you sort of are thrown in with the school year already started and trying to catch up. So it's really the better way to do things. Do you have to hire any new library techs this summer? Are you hiring anybody right now, or is everybody hopefully coming back to their jobs in the fall?
We are in the process of hiring, yes. It's a kind of a revolving door. So that's why I said at the beginning, when we're fully staffed, we're currently in the process. And I had a meeting recently about how I could be more involved in the hiring process, because it's not mandatory that I am part of the hiring process, because the principals are the supervisors for the library techs. So I, usually when there's somebody that needs to be hired, I send an email to the principal and ask very politely if I can be on the interview panel. But this time around, I asked if I could put in the paperwork and kind of be in charge of the hiring process. And he said, okay. So this is my first time being in charge of the hiring process. So we'll see how it goes.
That's fantastic. Yesterday, I caught up with one of my friends from a job that I had years ago, and she's been retired now for years, and we both shared an assistant, and we struggled with that assistant, because while that assistant had been a phenomenal kindergarten classroom aide, there were no skills that translated into the new job as being a library para, including the fact that this person was severely dyslexic. And when you are severely, and somebody criticized me, they're like, you cannot criticize somebody for their disability. I said, they're going to be a fantastic kindergarten aide. But when you're trying to do things like generate patron cards and spine label barcodes, I mean, you start switching around letters and numbers like this particular assistant was. I was commiserating with my former colleague, because we regularly had to compensate for the fact that our assistant was severely dyslexic in a library setting. And I don't know what you can do to sort of work through that hiring process, but I hate to be one, and I don't want to ever turn somebody away from a job they feel passionately about. But there are large mistakes one can make if we are reversing and switching around letters and numbers. So I don't know, but are you getting applicants for your job postings? Are they actively open right now?
Well, so the hiring process, I don't know if how it's a really weird system for my district, and I'm sure this happens in other districts, but we have it's an eligibility list. And so we have open enrollment one time a year. People, they take a test, there's a oral panel, and then they get put on a ranking. And then every time there's an opening, you get names from this list. And then you use this list up. And then if you exhaust the list, you can open the eligibility pool again and get candidates again. But if you don't exhaust the list, you have to keep using this list until your year is up. So yeah, we've had a couple of openings this year where we just keep using this list. So I've had some people contact me, and they've seen the postings for the job openings, and they're curious, or they wanted to apply. And I said, well, I'm sorry you're not on the eligibility list, but I'll keep you in mind. Our opening for that is in November. So just keep your eye out for the eligibility list, not the actual job postings.
Interesting.
It's kind of confusing.
And yet I see why this would make sense, though, from a hiring perspective. You're sort of like pre-filtering. It's stage one, right? It's stage one. So listeners tuning in, regardless of how long they've been librarians or they're training to move into a library soon, have a fairly good sense of what the beginning of our school year looks like. And yet I cannot for 1 minute fathom what the start of your school year as the district coordinator looks like.
Yeah, so the beginning of my school year was very confusing. I got my office situated and, unpacked things. And then I literally sat there for a minute and I did not know what to do because I had no one telling me. There was no direction. Like, I have a boss and she is the program director for professional development. So it's kind of a weird, she's great and she loves libraries. So she's very supportive, but it's kind of a weird place to be put under for libraries. I just kind of sat there for a minute and I was like, I'm not really sure where to go or what to do or who to help first. I kind of was waiting for the phone to ring, because I keep telling people I'm kind of Batman. Like, I go where I'm needed, so when duty calls, I go.
Oh, is there like a bat signal? Like, all of a sudden you're
much.
Like,
people call and then I get in my car and I go. So the school year was really strange. And, it was also strange because in libraries, like, the beginning of the school year is hectic and you're rushing to get textbooks out, or we have iPads. So it's crazy, like the tech problems, or, kids forgot their password, or invariably we have a line out the door because kids forgot their passcodes because they hadn't used their iPad over summer and they forgot what their passcode was. It's just nuts. And the first day of school, I was sitting there alone and I didn't know what to do.
I'm curious because when we start our school year with the staff, our paraprofessionals, because they're on a different contract, are usually they're only part of some of that, because it's a lot of this is just sort of like in service and some training. And do you have an opportunity to work with your team? Because you said they work 6 hours a day. Forgive me, that sounds like less than full time.
Correct.
And I think that's intentional.
Yes.
Yeah, it's intentional. They don't have to be given benefits.
Correct.
That's wrong. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So it would be very, I know, because we have a situation like this. I'm the only school librarian in my district. And if I were to meet with our elementary team, they're all media tax paras, they would not be paid to be there because they clock in, they clock out, they're done with the day. When's it supposed to happen?
Yeah. So we do have meetings like Wednesdays from 1 to 2 once a month.
Okay.
That's our trainings.
Okay.
So it's not very
long.
Talk
fast.
And
talk fast.
Yeah. So if I do training with them, I usually have to go to them and do it in the library. And so it's a little bit like Groundhog Day because I do have a lot of new people. So I have to go to them and do the same thing, 3 to 4 times because I have to go to the site and do it in their library, because 1 hour once a month is not enough time to train all the new people with everything that they need to do. And then you can't have them close their library and come all together and do it at once in one space. So we occasionally have had opportunity to have training time. Like we've been able to go to like the county office of education and have trainings, and so that like they're like my boss is the PD director, so she's obviously supportive of professional development. So we've been able to go to trainings and have everyone close their libraries and come to full day trainings at the county office. So those have been really nice. But as far as like taking everyone to a central place, like that's something I want to do. Jumping ahead to year 2 things, but something I want to do next year is have like work days for all of us and be like, everyone's going to come like in-house and work together and be able to train in-house on what we need to do, because we don't have destiny. We're weird, but we don't have destiny. So our trainings, when we go to the county office and everyone's like, okay, open up destiny. It's like, well, we don't have that. So let's go over here in the corner, do our own thing.
Forgive me, what Circs software do you use?
We use Insignia.
Okay. All right. It makes me think that for your team, your site visits have got to be really helpful, because each space comes with its own unique challenges and goals, because each space has been occupied by different people who are making different decisions. And you have this opportunity now. You can swoop in there like Batman, and you can start to address these things from a top-down fashion, because you have the eyes of a librarian. You're going to be able to see some of those gaps and what needs to happen in this space, but on at those particular spaces based on those particular buildings' needs.
Yes, and I have so many new people. There have been 7 people that have been hired within the last 2 years.
That's a lot.
And then we're hiring 2 new people. So it'll be 9 new people that need training, like in-depth training, more than like, they can check in, check out and do some basic reports. But the survival strategies that I've seen when I go there, they're doing their best, and they're like, okay, well, I just go here and I have been doing this, and this is how I've been running this report, or this is how I've been, the teacher asked this, and this is how I've figured out how to do it. And I'm like, wow, you're very resourceful, but there's a much easier way to do that,
right?
But they're doing what they can. And I'm like, it's just because no one's shown you a better way.
Well, and I think something that would go towards retention of your text is feeling, having that realization that this job becomes incrementally easier after year 1, that if all you have to go on is year 1, I don't know how or what you could do at the district level to impress upon those folks who are hoping to keep people more than 1 year, given how steep that learning curve is for somebody who doesn't have formal library training.
Well, it doesn't help that every district in our area does have their library techs at 8 hours with benefits. So, and I've been banging that drum all year and pointing that out to my district administration, so they are aware that that is one of the reasons why we're leaching people to other districts. So there, I understand.
Interesting. Well, and again, this is where the solution is just out of our grasp. Like, I know the solution, but I'm not in charge of the money. And
yep.
So no, I'm hoping that the longer you're in this job, the likely is that you might be able to keep some of your people from leaving. How weird was it to see somebody else in your former library doing the job that you in part used to do?
It's a little weird, but not as weird as you might think, because they didn't hire a teacher librarian to do the job. So they backfilled it with another library tech. So there's 3 library techs now at the high school instead of a teacher librarian and 2 library techs. So I partly still feel like I'm there because the 3 of them ask lots of questions, and my office is still at the high school. My office is a classroom. So just have a classroom at the high school, way back in the corner, like nobody knows I'm there. It is the farthest back corner from anything that you could, like, no, it's literally the tucked away, like in the back. No one knows that it's even there. So I feel like I'm still kind of there, but kind of not. And I was also coaching esports, and the esports lab is in the library. So I feel like I never left.
And yet, it would be very hard to see any of all the amazing things you've done unravel. So I have to imagine that just being able to troubleshoot and be physically in proximity to where you used to work makes some of this easier than having to get in your car and drive over to your former school and try and pick up the pieces. So you became the director of the district you'd already worked in. I'm assuming that your adjustment was considerably smoother because you were already acquainted with all of the buildings, the central administration, and every library in the district.
Yeah, and most of the administrators at the other schools. So my district has a, like, kind of a career path for administrators where a lot of them have to kind of do a tour of duty, as they say, through the high school. So they have to
rite of passage.
Pretty much. So a lot of them were VPs at the high school at one point in time before they became principals of their own school sites. So I know a lot of the principals that are at the elementary schools, and I'm like, I still have their cell phone numbers. So, I was texting them and like, hey, we're gonna be working in here, and like, can you open up the library? Like, so. So people, they're like, oh, Mr. So-and-so is, being a bud today. And like, oh, Jerry, like, I got a cell phone number. So, like, let me text him right now and ask him what's up. So, I have like relationships with a lot of the people in this district because I've been there 16 years.
I think they were very wise to hire you. And the fact that they passed you over once is only partially redeemed by the fact they corrected that oversight the next year. But I do think they owe you. All right. So hindsight is 2020. In what way has this transition given you a new perspective on the job you once held as a librarian in this district?
Oh, man, I don't even know how to answer this question.
Because they didn't put another librarian in that position. Yeah. So I see this as it's definitely a compromise.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all I can say. It's a compromise. They didn't replace you.
They haven't replaced me yet is kind of how I'm looking at it, because I'm still hopeful that it will happen at some point. And I keep pushing for that. Like, so my first like priority for staffing is to get the text to be full-time. And then
absolutely
teacher librarians at the 2 high schools. So,
well, and forgive me, but moving them to full-time would on some level be cheaper than having to train new people every single year for vacancies that are happening because they are not full-time. So the math, I'm sure when you consider the hours spent, not just training new people, but looking, filling in those spots. I see the problem. I just hope that your higher ups see what's so painfully obvious to us. School librarians all have some aspect about their job that we wish we could change. Is it too soon in your new role as district library coordinator to ask what it is you'd like to change about your current role?
Absolutely not too soon. So the most frustrating thing about my job, I tell people that I am the middlest of middle management because I'm just a teacher. So my boss is middle management. That makes me the middlest of middle management because she is an administrator, but then she has an administrator that she reports to, who then reports to an associate superintendent, who then reports obviously to superintendent. So we're stuck in this like squishy middle that can't really get stuff done. So if I want to change anything, I have to ask her, who asks him, who asks him. It's just too many people to ask. Like, am I a coordinator or am I not? Do I get to make changes or do I not? Do I have the power to do stuff in libraries or do I not?
And do you, as I refer to, the person who holds the purse strings?
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't sound like...
Which is a different department.
Yes, that is another department as well. That you are not holding the purse strings, even though you are the director of an entire team of people.
Right.
What aspect about your new job do you find especially rewarding? We've sort of started to talk about this already.
So I think being able to really be able to work with the library techs and make their lives easier when I can show them how to do something easier, simpler, better, make them stronger, make them more comfortable in their job, make them feel that they're making changes or they're being successful. There have been times it's just, simple change or simple little thing to use insignia better. It is I don't think that there is a better or a good library management system out there. I think everyone has, because I've actually looked this year to see if there was anybody, and everyone complains about their element. But just knowing the little quirks or changes and how to use it to your advantage, and then showing them, okay, this is what you want to do. Well, here's the little report, or here's the little view, and here's how you go into this screen and you can see these things about your class or your kids. Or you're looking for this type of book. You want the kids to be able to search this type of way. And then in California, we have access to some free to us databases through this Compass program, and the taxpayers paid for it, but we have some databases that we can use. So we started using Teaching Books, and they have a lot of resources to enhance your read alouds. So you can bring in the author has recorded a little snippet with your book, or there's book trailers, or there's little activities or something. And so, I just showed a couple of them, and we have TVs in the library. Why can't we just use some of these? Or we've started to get iPads or use the technology, just something to brighten the space a little bit. And watching them, their eyes light up, or the spark of inspiration, for a moment. That has been really rewarding.
When I started my job as a high school librarian, and it was, I went for a year and had said out loud, I miss feeling capable. I miss feeling competent. I miss feeling, because I left a job I had done for 14 years, elementary library, and I could do this job in my sleep. And I could plan out what I was doing for weeks out in advance, and I could do the job in my sleep, at which point I knew I needed to leave and do something else. But what I missed most was how much of what I had done was rote and automated, and I felt capable, and I knew names, and I knew how to move around the buildings, and I didn't flounder. And I think floundering is the most discouraging feeling to have when you're trying something new.
Yeah, and that's hard, and that's kind of what has left some of the people led some of the people to leave. When they feel like they're on their own, they're a little island out there, and teachers just come in and they're not really sure what you're doing, so they can't help you. And some of them have reached out to our technology department to ask for help for insignia. And they're like, we have no idea what your program is. We don't know what to help you. So, and then where else can they get help or training on that,
When I worked in my previous job, we all had library assistants, and our library assistants were full-time in the building, and the librarians were the ones that moved from building to building to teach the classes when they were in the space. And I remember working with one of our most senior library assistants, and she was there in large part because her grandchildren were in the building. And for her, this was as much about being close to her grandchildren and bringing them back and forth to school, and as it was about doing the job. But as the senior most assistant, all the other assistants called and emailed my assistant and so basically and it was frustrating for her because it was like she was perpetually training another person who would very likely not be there next year. And putting that burden on somebody who is, forgive me, undercompensated, and in this case, not full-time, again, they're going to ask the person who was most likely to have those answers, another assistant, and it really does wear on them. Somebody who's tuning in right now is considering making such a move to a district coordinator. What would have been helpful to know when you were contemplating taking this role as a district coordinator?
For someone that's thinking about it, so this role is completely self-starting. You are on your own, and you have to be okay with that, and it can be lonely. There is hardly anybody checking in on me and making sure, like, day to day I'm doing my job. So, like, nobody calls me to make sure that I'm at my desk doing my work. They're just assuming that I'm doing, and like where I am doing what I'm doing and training and where I need to be training and doing all of that kind of stuff. So if that kind of independence is something that appeals to you, then this might be a good job for you. But if you thrive more on being with your students and being around the people, this role, you're not around students very much. Like, if you need to be with the student interaction, like, I could probably be more with students if I really wanted to, but most of my job is on my computer. And I joke with people that my backpack is my office, because I take my computer and my scanner and I go where I need to go, and everything that I need to do is on my computer. I barely have an office for like Zoom background, basically.
Sara, you're going into year 2. Last year's learning curve was undoubtedly the steepest it'll ever be. What is something that you've got on your radar now that you've got that year 1 under your belt?
So we were talking a little bit about the buying portion of it. Something I want to do to hopefully make this a little bit easier is to try and identify where people are passionate and where they're strongest, and hopefully have one of those pull-out days, if possible, where we all sit around, we have like a buying party, right? And we have like tables set up where people are like, okay, you really like, everybody books. So you're going to go over there and you're going to plow through all the school library journal and Booklist and look at all the reviews for all of the everybody books and pick out and make a list for everybody. And you really like, I'll set a graphic novel table, obviously, and you really like, fiction, romance for teens. You're going to sit over there and read all the reviews for that. And so then people can make like one list of all of the books that had great reviews already, and we can pull from that to kind of supply everyone's library. And that can be like a base list for everyone to pick off of. And, not every library is the same. We do have some dual immersion programs. So we have 2 schools that are Spanish dual immersion. So they're going to need a lot more Spanish than everybody else. And then we have like some high Hmong population. So we need a lot of Hmong books, so we're going to have like, not every school is going to say like, this is the only books you can buy, right? But we can have like a strong base of, here's a list that you can work off of, that all of these are good and approved. And we can kind of like work off of that, where here's a chunk of money that is good to spend. And I've read it, and I read it one time. And here's thousands of dollars worth of books that I read one time and I don't have to read 6,000 books. Maybe I've cut it down to like 1,000 books, right? So we can work smarter and I can reduce the amount of reviews that I have to read.
Exactly. Sara Smith, I am so excited. You and I are definitely getting a drink together, and I'm buying next week.
All right.
So the last time I saw you, so a year ago, and so we will be able to connect again in person. Your home turf. You're going to be in California, and I trust your tour guide skills. You will be an expert. But I am so excited that you and I get to see each other next week. It really goes a long way when it comes towards motivating me and the job I have to do. And I'm grateful that you're here for your third episode. Promise me you'll come back again soon.
Oh, yes.
But I'll see you next week. And thank you so much. Would you let listeners know? Because you and I, we have been crossing paths. And thank you, Twitter, because we can document this. We go back to July of 2020.
Yep.
So our friendship is 4 years old. We met in person in Salt Lake City. I know we did. Yes. I know we did because we went out for lunch and it was like, oh, do you drink beer? I absolutely do. Let's go. And we never want to make those assumptions. We saw each other last year in Chicago. Let listeners know how they can follow you on social media.
So I am still on the Twitter. It's still Twitter for me. And then Instagram, it's SM_wordsmith. I'm also on Blue Sky, SM Wordsmith, no underscore. So they don't like underscores. And then I have the website still, graphiclibrary.org. And I'm on Threads too, I think. Yeah. I just kind of lurk on there. I also have a Facebook, Graphic Library Reviews. If you're more of a Facebook person, so I post up the reviews on there as well. And I think that's it for social medias. I try and keep up with all of them, but there's too many. There's a lot.
You're a little busy. Listen, I will see you next week. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. See you next week.
I am so grateful to Sara Smith for sharing her survival story with us today. Friends, I'm hoping to feature I Survived conversations throughout the episode lineup. I hope you'll consider reaching out to the podcast if you have an I Survived story to share with listeners. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. Use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more. See the link in today's show notes. And because I'm in full podcast mode and recording all summer long, you can be sure we will have a new episode every week. The topic of our next episode will be National School Library of the Year, Syosset High School, and my conversation with Christina Holzweiss, Trish Sergi, and Dr. Sarah Wasser. I hope you will tune in.